Today we're going to work on solving multi-step equations. There's just a couple of little notes that I want you guys to keep in mind. In order to solve multi-step equations, you use your inverse operations to isolate the variable. Remember, the variables are any letter that you see. It's the unknown in pre-algebra. So you're going to have x's and y's, you're going to have r's, you're going to have different letters that you're going to get by itself. And remember, inverse operations are the opposite operations. So if I'm adding to get rid of something, I'm going to have to subtract. And then if I'm multiplying to do the inverse operation, you're going to divide. It's doing the opposite action. In order to get your variables alone, you're going to have to do the reverse of the order of operations that we know, PEMDAS. So instead of dealing with parentheses first, you're going to deal with addition and subtraction first. You're going to reverse it. So let's first get into our examples. What we need to do is make sure that we can simplify both sides of the equation. So what I always do is I draw my line to separate the two sides. I see that I can combine some like terms on the right side of my equation. Because they both have the r variable after them, I can go ahead and combine. A negative 3r and a 2r create a negative 1r. So I combine those two, and then I rewrite the left side of my equation. Now I just have a one-step equation that I need to figure out. To get r by itself, I see that negative 1 is multiplying, so the opposite is going to divide. So I divide by negative 1, and I must do it on both sides to keep my equation equal. It's the equality properties. So once I get rid of negative 1 by dividing, it cancels out on the right side, and I am left with 1 equals r. So I can check my answer by plugging it in to the very first problem. Instead of negative 1 equals negative 3 times r, I plug in a 1 there. It's negative 3 times 1 plus a 2 times 1. I will know that this answer is correct if my left side of the equation equals the right. So let's go ahead and answer it. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3, and 2 times 1 is a 2. Negative 3 plus 2 is actually equal to negative 1, so we know that both sides are actually checked and equal. So I know that r is positive 1 because I checked my answer. I'm going to go ahead and get to the next problem. I'm again going to draw my wall, and I'm going to combine my like terms on the left side of the equation. An 8x minus 6x is 2x, and I'm going to rewrite everything else to simplify it. Now, this is a multi-step equation. I'm going to have to do two things to get x by himself. Remember, we have to do the reverse of the order of operations. So instead of dealing with the 2x because they're multiplying, I'm going to get rid of this minus 25. In order to get rid of that minus 25, I do the inverse property, so I add it to the other side. You always look at the sign in front of the number. So by adding 25 to both sides, I cancel it out on the left, and I'm left with 2x equals, and then negative 35 plus 25 is negative 10. Now I'm back to my one-step equation, and I have to divide by 2 because it is multiplying. The inverse operation is to divide. So when I divide both sides by 2, I get a negative 5 for x. Now you can check your answer by plugging it in. So I have 8 times negative 5, and what I'm doing right now is I'm just, instead of x, I'm plugging in that negative 5 instead, minus 6 times negative 5, minus 25, and we hope that it all equals a negative 35. If it does, we know that our answer is correct. So now I'm going to simplify the left side. I have negative 40 minus a negative 30 minus 25. And then, again, hoping it equals negative 35. Now, negative 40 minus a negative 30 is the same as negative 40 plus a positive 30. You keep change, and so that becomes a negative 10 minus 25. And then again, you can keep change. Keep change. A negative 10 and a negative 25 do create a negative 35. So we have that both sides of our equation are correct. So when we plugged in negative 5, that was the correct answer, so we know it's correct. This third problem, the first thing we have to do is, of course, draw our wall. and then simplify the left side of the equation. We can make it look a little easier. The first thing we need to do is to distribute that 2 within the parentheses. So 2 times 1 is 2 minus 10x plus 4 equals a negative 8. And the thing I do realize that happens a lot is we always multiply the first number, but people tend to forget the second multiplication problem. So make sure that you have a minus 10x and not a minus 5x. Now I'm going to go ahead and combine my like terms. I have a 2 and a 4, and they're both positive, so it makes a 6 minus 10x equals negative 8. Now I need to get rid of the 6 first. He is off to the side, and to get rid of him, I look at the sign in front of the 6. So in front of the 6, it's really a positive 6. So to get rid of it, I subtract on both sides. When I get rid of the 6, I'm left with a negative 10x equals a negative 14. It is not negative 2, it's negative 14. The last thing I need to do is divide by negative 10. Now, we have worked with this in class, but we just created a fraction when we divided, okay? So, first off, we have a negative divided by a negative, which is a positive 14 over 10. But that fraction can be reduced. They're both even. So when I divide by 2, I get 7 over 5, and that will be an answer. Or you could turn to a mixed number, which is 1 2/5. So you might possibly get some fractions or decimals as your answers, and that's okay. What I want you guys to do is do the next 3 problems on your own and pause the video. Try them, they're just like the examples from prior, and you can check your answers by plugging them into the equation. When you go ahead and do that, I pause the video, and then when you bring it back, you can see what the answers are. I'll give you a hint for the very first equation. Once you draw your line, we have an n off to one side of the equation and another n at the other. You need to get them together. So what you need to do is subtract this n to cancel it out on the left side, and then subtract it here as well. You're going to end up getting 2 equals negative 4 plus n, and then you guys can solve it at the end. Go ahead and pause now and then check back for your answers. All right, so here are the answers for the top 3 problems. I hope you checked your answers and can double check your work if you didn't get the right answer. Go ahead and try the last 3 on your page of notes, and then see how you do by plugging in your answers. If you have any questions, let me know.